I've been obsessed with chess for exactly 1 month now. Yeah, you heard that right. 30 days of grinding openings, tactics puzzles, and those endless YouTube vids on fundamentals. I started out struggling with the Caro-Kann as black. All those early pawn tensions and calculations had me sweating. So I switched to the King's Indian setup. It's more hyper-modern, less calc-heavy right out the gate, unless white gets super aggressive, which, spoiler, they totally did in this game. And today I just hit my first ever 1250 ELO on Chessigma against a 771 rated opponent, no less. This game was my proof that all that hard work pays off. We're going to break it down, move by move. Openings, mid-game magic, and a checkmate that made me fist pump. Let's dive in. All right, game on. White starts by developing the knight to f3, eyeing the center. I hit back by advancing my pawn to d5, staking my claim in the middle. Classic fundamental, control the center early. White follows up with pawn to g3, prepping that fianchetto bishop. I develop my knight to f6, attacking the e4 square. Then white places the bishop on g2. Boom, that bishop lasers down the long diagonal. My turn. I play pawn to g6, mirroring the setup. Fianchetto time. White castles kingside. Smart king safety move. I copy by developing my bishop to g7, getting it active and ready to rumble. See that? In my first month, I hammered home development and king safety. No wandering queens yet. Just get your army out and tuck the king away. White plays pawn to c3, supporting a future d4 push. I castle kingside. Equal so far, right? But white's queen jumps out early to b3, aggressive, eyeing my b7 pawn. I defend by developing my knight to c6. White advances pawn to d3, supporting the center pawn chain. I slide my kingside rook to e8, eyeing potential e-pawn advances. Then white breaks open the center with pawn to e4. I kick the queen away with knight to a5. White chases it to b5, and I retreat the knight back to ci6. Back and forth like a queen tango. White pushes the pawn to e5, attacking my knight on f6. I say no thanks by playing pawn to a6, booting the queen off b5. White repositions the queen to c5, but it's hanging loose. Time for some spice. I advance my knight to g4. That knight jumps forward, eyeing the f2 weak spot and pressuring the kingside. Okay, full disclosure, this is where my heart raced. White blunders by moving the knight to g5. Oh man, that knight's exposed. I snatch the e5 pawn for free with my knight from c6 taking on e5. White grabs my d5 pawn with the bishop to d5, but I hit back with pawn to e6, chasing the bishop away. White retreats the bishop to b3 safely. Now the mid-game heats up. This is tactics territory, folks. I've been drilling forks and pins on Lickers puzzles. My knight on e5 attacks the undefended pawn on d3. And if I take it, from d3, it forks white's bishop on c1 and the queen on c5. Boom, I take on d3 with that knight. Free pawn, and now it's forking the bishop and queen. White's queen slides to a3 trying to fight back, but too late. My knight on d3 takes the bishop on c1. I snag it. White recaptures with the rook on c1, but my queen's been waiting. I take the hanging knight on g5 with my queen. White finally develops the knight to d2, but I capture that knight on d2 with my queen. Knight number 2 down the hatch. We're in the endgame now, but it feels like a fireworks show. White brings the rook to d1, seemingly pinning my queen. Nope, I ignore it and launch my queen to f2 with check. White's king scurries to h1, and then my queen takes on h2. Checkmate. That queen sneaks through the h-file. Total infiltration.